Hello guys, welcome to Code with BK. So the practicals for ISC Computer Science 2020 are near. So I'm going to brush up the major concepts that they basically ask. So you can divide the problems into three categories. They are strings, you have integers working with the numbers, and then you have 2D arrays. So they have three questions and they pick up a question from one of each categories. Okay, so I'm going to brush up the major concepts that are involved that they usually ask, and last time they were little more creative with this, so I'll try to twist the problems a little, make it a little more complicated. Okay, so that you can get an idea of what they can ask. Okay, so this one is the first problem, okay, that I have prepared. Okay, so suppose, right, you have a 2D matrix, something like this. Okay, so the inputs that you need to take are m, that is the number of rows, okay, n, that is the number of columns, okay, read in the values, m into n values, okay, integers, I'll say integers, okay, integers. Okay, now what you have to do is you have to find the sum of each row. Okay, so suppose the sum of this row is a, sum of this row is b, and sum of this row is c. Then you have to find the sum of each column, which is, you can take it p, q, r, s, and to each element of this 2D matrix you have to add the corresponding row sum and the corresponding column sum. So to x, so this element you will add a plus p, to this element you will add a, which is the sum of this particular row, and you have to add q, which is the sum of this particular column q. Things that you have to keep in mind, that you don't have to add first. For example, you don't have to make it this element as x plus a, that is you add the sum of the row to this, and then you find the sum of the column. You have to find the sum of the columns and the rows separately first, store them, and then add the values to each of the elements. Okay, size range we can keep m and n. So m and n should be greater than equal to 3 and less than equal to 5. Okay, so if any of these values is out of this range, you print size out of range. Okay, this is the problem statement. I guess this is pretty clear. So you can divide it into 4 parts. First is reading the values. Okay, second is checking for the 4 parts. First is reading values, m and m into n integers. Second is checking for the valid range. Third is processing. Okay, and fourth is printing. Okay, printing. All right, so I'm going to pick up each part and then I'm going to explain each of this, and then finally I'm going to write this code on an ID and run this. Okay, so this is more of an explanation than just writing the code, because traversing the 2D array, okay, traversing the matrix, finding the sum of the elements of rows and columns is an essential part, is an essential concept that they can ask in the practical paper. Okay, and how do you read mn and mn2 values, and how do you check for the valid range? Okay, so I'll start now. I'll start with the first part. So I have this as my public static void main. All right, so I will have, for example, if mn, I'll take one example. For example, say m is 3 and n is 3, so I have values like this, space separated integers. Okay, and the input will be like this. This will be the sample input. So for this I'm going to use a scanner to read from the standard input. Okay, to read from the console, because if I use a buffered reader, I'll have to read a line, then I have to parse the tokens, then I have to convert them into integers. It's a tedious task. Simpler way of reading m and m into n values for this kind of question is using a scanner. Okay, so this is the first part. This is part 1. Okay, so I'm going to use a scanner. Okay, import java.util.scanner, you can add scanner, or without that it won't compile. First to new scanner system.in. Okay, so this is just to give you a reference. I'm going to type this on an ID, compile and run. So I'm going to cross check it, don't worry about that. So open the scanner, and whenever I open the scanner, I always close the scanner somewhere at the bottom. Scanner.close. Okay, just a good practice. Your examiner will probably be impressed with this. Okay, it's a resource. If you don't close it, it's a resource leak. Okay. Now I have to read the value of m, so I'll say int m is equals to scanner dot next int. Simple as that. It reads the value, the first integer, which is enter in the input to m, which is number of rows. Int n is equals to scanner dot next int. Okay. Now you have values of m and n. There are two options you can take. First, you can directly check for the values for the valid range of m into n. If not, you print size of range, stop. Okay. Or you can read all the m into n values first and then check for range. I'm going to read the values first because I will have to read the values if m and n in the correct range. So I'm going to say I have to create a 2D array first. I'll say int arr is equals to new int m and n. And by default, all these values in the array will be 0. Don't need to initialize them. Okay, and then I have to read m into n integers. And the values, as I told you, the sample input will be something like this. If this is 3 and 3, okay, or if this is 3 and 4, say 3 rows and 4 columns, so the input will be something like this. Okay, space separated integers, number of rows, like 4 columns, so 4 integers per line, and into the number of lines, which is number of rows. Okay, so I have to read like this. So 1 2 3 4, so row wise. Okay, so I have to traverse the matrix row wise. Okay, int I is equals to 0, I is less than m for each row, I plus plus for int j is equals to 0, j is less than n, j plus plus, I'll say arr of I j equals to scanner dot next int. Okay, close the loop. And now my reading is done. So this is my scanner dot close. So my part 1 is done. This is reading the values from the input. Okay. The reason why we use I0, I is less than m, and J0, J is less than n, I'm going to explain when I'm going to process this, that why do we take Ij and not Ji. We will take Ji as well. Okay, so there is a reason behind that. I'll tell you how. So this is the part 1 where we read the inputs. Okay, we move on to part 2. I'm going to erase this. Okay, so I'm going to move on to part 2 where we are going to check for the valid range. Okay, so I can check it here. Okay, so I can say if, okay, so m n have to be greater than equal to 3 and less than equal to 5. So if m is less than 3 or m is greater than 5 or n is less than 3 or n is greater than 5, okay, I will print SOPLN size out of range. Okay, so they usually have something size out of range, size not valid, something like this. So try to print the exact statement that they have in the problem statement. Okay, so for me it is size out of range, so I'm going to exactly print size out of range. Try to keep the input, okay, the way input is taken and the way output is printed as close as possible in the samples given. Okay, you always have a sample input and output in questions for ISC practicals. Okay, and then you stop. It will say if this is not in the valid range, stop. There has never been a case where they say that if it's not size out of range, you proceed further. It's never been that. So you say return. Or you can use, this is a comment, you can use system dot exit and give some value 0. This is usually not taught, or maybe you know this. This exits the program anywhere. Okay, so part 1 and part 2. Okay, write the values and we have check for valid case. And our array is arr, number of rows are m, number of columns are n. That's it. Okay, we move on to processing now. Okay, okay, and why next int is useful and what is the difference between next and next line, you can find a video, I made a video on that. You can find it on my channel, and it clearly explains the difference between next and next line. Okay, so next works very close to the way next int works. It just looks for an integer. Okay, cool. Moving on. So this is part 3, where we process. Now we need to store the sum of the each row first, sum of the each column first. So how many columns, how many rows we have? We have m rows. Okay, so I'll take an array to store the sum of each row, and the number of rows are m. So I'll say int sum rows is equals to new int m. Number of sums that I need to store is equal to the number of rows, which is m. Then I have number of columns as n. So I'll say int sum calls is equals to new int n. Okay, sum of each column. Okay, number of columns are n. Now we need to process each. We need to find each of these values. We need to find sum of each row. So to find the sum of each row, you pick up each row and add all its elements. You pick up another row, add all its elements. That is, you have to traverse row wise. For example, so if these are 3 rows here, right? So this is, if we take I pointing to a row, so it will I0 will be first row, I1 will be second row, I2 will be third row. Similarly, if we take j pointer for, and I and j as standard pointers, it does not mean you have to always take I or j. Just take a variable. Okay, but keeping it I and j makes it very intuitive. Okay, so j0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so for each value of I is equals to 0, if I pick up j0, 1 and 1, 2 and 3, I get the sum of row 0. For I is equals to 1, if I pick up rows j0, 1, 2, 3, I get the sum of row 1. That is why we traverse for int I is equals to 0, I less than number of rows is m, and I plus plus. Okay, so for we traverse each row. So for I have met I is equals to 0, and I'm going to traverse j0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now I need to sum all the values. So I need to say int row sum is equals to 0. I traverse the entire column for this row. So I'll say for int j is equals to 0, j is less than n, j plus plus, and I'll say row sum plus equal to ARR was a matrix I and j. Okay, and then I'm going to set the row sum for this particular row into this sum rows, because this is what I have calculated for this particular row. So I'll say sum rows of I is equals to row sum, and then I'm going to close this loop. So this basically is going to find the sum of each row and store it into sum rows. Okay, take your time and go through it. The basic idea is, for a given row, you need to traverse the entire set of columns. Okay, and for that given row, you need to store back the value to the array. Okay, so for I0, I traverse j0, 1, 2, 3. For I0, so I takes values here. Okay, I takes values here 0, 1 and 2. Okay, 0, 1, 2, 2. And for each value of I, j takes values 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's like when I is 0, j is 0, 1, 2, 3. So you have 0, 0, which is this. Then you have 0, 1, which is this. Then you have 0, 2, which is this. 0, 3, which is this. Then I goes to, and when you find the sum in sum row sum, row I becomes this sum. So this sum is A. Okay, so sum rows is this. If this is sum rows, this is the sum rows array. It has m locations, which is 3 locations. So for 0th location, for I this row sum goes into, so I goes here. When I becomes 1, okay, j takes value 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, for I1, j takes value 0, 1, 2, 3. And every time I takes a new value, we set row sum to 0. So it starts at 0, so we have a fresh sum. So here again B. Okay, so when you have B here, B goes here into the ith location. Okay, for this value of I, because I became 1 here. Okay, so I became 1 here. The row sum for this case is B, goes here. Similarly, C comes here. Okay, So this is how basically traversing row measure wise works. Okay, now we have to find the sum of each column. Okay, and I'm going to use a very similar approach. I'm just going to traverse like this. Okay, that is for each j I'm going to traverse I012, 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 I012. For j0 I'll traverse I012, for j1 I'll traverse I012. So j comes first, for each j first. So I'll say for int j is equals to 0 for each column. So j is less than n, j plus plus. Okay, and then you have for each j0, add each, find the sum of each column. So I'll say int col sum is 0. Okay, then I'll say for int I is equals to 0, I is less than m, I plus plus col sum plus equal to arr of I j. Okay, and for a for loop, if you just have one statement under that, so that becomes the body of the for loop. Okay, so not adding these extra braces here. Okay, and now similarly, just the way we did with row sum, I'm going to say sum calls of this j, that is for this particular column, is going to be is equals to call sum. Okay, so the sum of each column goes into this particular array sum calls. Now we need to traverse this 2D matrix, okay, and add the value of each corresponding row and column to each particular element. Okay, so I'm going to delete this part now. So the traversal in this case does not really matter because you have to pick up each element, right? And you can do it row wise or you can do it column wise. I'm going to go row wise. Okay, for int I is equals to 0, and every time you see that I'm writing a for loop, I always have int I is equals to 0. So if you have I outside somewhere declared way before you have started coding this for loop, don't write int I again, obviously you'll get a compilation error. That's why we keep int I is equals to 0, so that you use the value I whenever you start a for loop. Okay, and the scope of this I is limited within the body of this for loop. Okay, for each row which is number of rows is m and I plus plus, for int j is equals to 0, j is less than n, j plus plus. So r I j is the element I and jth element. For this I and this j, this is arr of ij. Okay, and then you have to add the corresponding row sum which is denoted by I and column sum which is denoted by j. So I am going to say arr of I j plus equal to the corresponding row. So row is I, so we are going to add some rows of I plus some columns of j. Okay, and this is how processing is complete. Okay, then finally you have to print it. So all you need to do is write this very loop again. Okay, for int I is equals to 0, I is less than m, I plus plus, or for int j is equals to 0, j is less than n, j plus plus, system.out.print, not ln, because I want to print like each row first. So I'll say arr of I comma j plus a space, and then after I print each row I'm going to say change a line. Okay, and that is when my programming is done. So I'm going to write it on an ID, compile and test it, and then run it. Okay, so I hope you understood this idea of this. This is the major thing that you need to understand. For ith I comma j element, okay, you need to find the sum of the corresponding, so because we already found. So sum of this corresponding row is some rows I, and sum of this corresponding column is some column j. You add both these values to this particular element. Okay, so now we are going to move on to coding and compile and test it.
Okay guys, so this is the code that we wrote, and you can see the scanner to read Okay, and I have to add this import java.util scanner. Then we have part 1 reading m and n, and then we have reading the values to the 2D array, checking for the valid size. There's a yellow mark here. I'll explain you the reason here, and I'll show you also with this that even with this the program exits. Closing the scanner, this is optional, but I always add closing the scanner. Then there is part 3. We create array to hold the sum of each row, array to hold the sum of each column. Then we find the sum of each row, we find the sum of each column. Then we add the sum of each corresponding row and column to each element, and finally we just print. You can see this print in this println, that is we are printing each row first, okay, and then changing line. Okay, all right, and this is the sample I'm going to use. So 3 3, which is going to be a valid range because our mn has to be between 3 and 5. So for 3 into 3, if I enter these values 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, these are the row sums, okay, these are the column sums. So picking up this first element, so 1 plus 6 plus 12 is going to 12 plus 6 18 19, which is the first expected output. Second is 2 plus 15 is 17 plus 6 is 23. So this is the output, and similarly you can check for any value. For example, this one, this element 8 plus 15 is 23 plus 24 is 47. So let's just run this. Okay, so I'll say 3 3 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. So inputting values just as given in the sample. Okay, and there we have our output. Okay, let's just put in some junk values 6 and 3, and oh, we have to read all the values. So I'll say 1 2 3 6 rows, okay, and 3 columns. So 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18, such that of range. So I believe when you have a sample input, it can be a case where they give you all these 6 into 3 values, or you just have a size out of range as right after you enter 6 and 3. So what you can do is, if you want it the other way, you can cut this. Okay, if I can cut this and you can paste it here. Okay, and then if you check this again, okay, so you will see if I say 6 and 3, it directly says size out of range. Okay, so it depends upon the sample. If the sample say something like this, after m and n you simply get size out of range, so you better check for the validity of m and n, and then after that you read in the integers. Okay, so this is it, this is the code. And I'm going to, oh, the reason for yellow line here is because when you are returning from this, you're closing the terminating the program, you have not closed the scanner. Okay, so now you will see the yellow line disappear. Okay, so this is something that you can add, and let me just show you with this as well. And system.exit 0. So I'll just enter another 6 and 3, say 6 and 3 at size out of range. Okay, so even this you can use. So this was the one sample that I worked on, and you should basically remember how to traverse the matrix, how to traverse each row, how to traverse each column. Okay, and I hope this was helpful. So stay tuned for more practice videos on IC practicals, and thank you for watching.